Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rally Day Partners, and this is the Founders Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello and welcome to the Founders Journey podcast. This is Ryan Heckman, your host, and I'm here and delighted to be welcoming to the Rally Day Worldwide Headquarters Geoff Smart from ghSMART. Geoff, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Ryan.
Little bit of maybe get you to turn red a little bit, but I was looking forward to this episode for obvious reasons. One, that we've known each other, I think, since 2004 or 2005, so that's a long time. Because we both live in Denver, we bump into each other on a lot of different projects that we may be working on, community or otherwise. I really look up to Geoff, not only as a thought leader in the area of executive recruiting and sourcing and so forth, but also as a business builder. He's been quietly building a very large, highly regarded management consulting firm called ghSMART. In 2024, it was ranked in the top 5 of all consultancies worldwide. And in that group of 5, I think, Geoff, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's, McKinsey's in there, Boston Consulting Group's in there, Bain's in there, and you all.
That's right.
Which is just pound for pound an amazing outcome. Geoff is also a civic leader here in Denver and Colorado and the nation more broadly. After writing his book, Leadocracy, did a lot of work with governments in terms of how to source better talent for those very important but oftentimes less interesting roles to private sector leaders. Move the needle a lot in that regard. And, lastly, I've always looked up to Geoff. He has a very large and maybe if you were to grade it on the quality and quantity metric, maybe the most powerful family in Colorado. And he's a wonderful human being. He's been a mentor and a friend and partner on a variety of things in my life. So I'm just thrilled that Geoff is here.
Thank you. Well, it's a great pleasure. I love the concept of the podcast, and I have great respect for you, Ryan. So let's get into it. This will be fun.
Yeah, and in terms of format, we typically focus almost exclusively on the journey of the founder, but I think just given your obvious expertise, and that a lot of our executives and founders in general are challenged with recruiting, I would like to spend maybe half the time on just bending your ear on maybe some what we call swing thoughts, those little ideas that can provide great impact to people, relating to sourcing, candidate selection, and onboarding, if we could, as well. So if you're up to that, that was what I was thinking.
Let's do it. Let's do both. So we'll talk talent, and we can also talk founder's journey.
Perfect. In terms of your journey, I've always kind of looked at ghSMART through the lens of I was at a private equity firm in 2004 when we actually did our first engagement with you all. So that was so many years ago. And at the time, you were one of the very few thought leaders in this space. The McKinsey's of the world, Bain, and so forth. They were really focused on the what. You were focused on the who.
Right.
Take us back to presenting your business plan to Peter Drucker, who you got the great fortune to spend some time with at Claremont Graduate University outside of LA. Bring us back to that moment, because it's actually a really funny story about your business plan for ghSMART, and you're a great mentor and the father of management in this country and worldwide. What was his reaction?
Yeah, it was a great pleasure. I chose Claremont as a graduate program in large part because Peter Drucker was still there. I think he was in his 80s, but it was sort of like learning at the foot of Socrates, right? So he's considered the father of management. And the idea was this. So in the mid 1990s, financial engineering was hot. Private equity had already started its growth, but And there's this mysterious sense that the people part of a deal might have something to do with the returns ultimately. You have like an Arthur Rock, the great venture capitalist who invested in Apple and Intel and a bunch of other great places, saying things like, nearly every mistake I've made in this business has been not in picking the wrong idea, but in picking the wrong people. And you have Peter Drucker, the father of management, doing high fives all day long on the value of management, the importance of hiring, et cetera. So to answer your question, I had interned at a venture capital firm a couple of years prior, and I had heard over and over again, bet the jockey, not the horse. It's all about the people, et cetera, et cetera. Yet the entire private equity industry appeared to be set up for intense and almost forensic level financial due diligence and market due diligence and product due diligence. But it wasn't at all clear how to really figure out the people part of the deal. So I pitched a business plan to Peter Drucker, which was, hey, I want to do my PhD dissertation on this topic of how investors bet on the right people. And does that part of the deal really matter or not? And then I want to build a business around it. And he was kind of like, all right, well, first things first. So I did the research. And Ryan, what I found was I got a bunch of good data. Henry Kravis from KKR was the first private equity investor to give me a bunch of data on how they evaluate management teams and the returns on various deals. And then I got like 70 other private equity firms to give me their data on how they diligence management teams and then the returns on the deals. And I basically just grouped it into, this is a group of a bunch of investors who might do other things well, but don't really put a lot of time and energy into figuring out the people part. Here's this bucket number 2, which is investors that put a bunch of time and energy into figuring out the people part. So are their returns the same or are they different? And what I found was the returns were 4 times higher for the private equity investors that put a lot of time and energy into really figuring out the people part of the deal. So I went around to Peter Drucker and said, hey, I think this is like a huge finding. I want to go help the world at the intersection of high finance and psychology, really, help investors improve their bets on people. And he said, all right, that sounds pretty interesting. But so I wrote a whole business plan on how we were going to create the McKinsey or the Bain of leadership advisory and everything. And he gave me an A- on the project, which kind of pissed me off at the time. I thought it was A+ worthy. But he said, hey, the idea of going deep and collecting data and really helping investors or operators make better decisions about people, he said, I buy that part of the business plan. What I don't buy is how the heck are you supposed to attract the right talent into your company to do this work? Because he's like, sorry to hurt your feelings, but you don't know anything. You don't have any money. You don't have any customer relationships. And so, why would someone go to work with you? So it was a humbling moment, which was like, hey, the market need for this is there, but you're going to have to figure out how to build the culture and the organization to attract the right talent. And this is the guy, mind you, who coined the term culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that was the most fun early part of the ghSMART founders journey, was being challenged by actual Peter Drucker to like build a culture that can attract the right talent to then carry forward on this market opportunity. So that was the first hard assignment that then got us on the journey to building a firm in this area. So that was scary and difficult, but it's easy when I think it's easier to be an entrepreneur when you're in your early 20s because you don't have any responsibilities. I was semi-starving grad student, and so putting out a shingle and calling it ghSMART and Company, not dissimilar from McKinsey and Company, and saying, hey, we're going to help people who run or own large companies to make better people decisions. It was pretty easy to get started. What was harder then is to actually execute on the business plan and to prove Peter Drucker wrong that it's not an A- concept, is an A+ concept.
Well, a lot of people I think would consider an A- from Peter Drucker to be a pretty shining moment in their careers.
Fair enough.
But I get that you're a type A person, and I can only imagine you wincing and carrying that little chip on your shoulder for a little while you proved him wrong.
For sure.
Which you did, which is a good segue. You've been working on building the ghSMART platform. Has it been 30 years now, Geoff?
Yes. So we're 29 years in a month from now. And so next year will be our 30-year anniversary.
And without divulging confidential information, give us a sense of the kind of financial profile. Obviously, day one had zero.
Yes. I remember that day like it was yesterday.
Which is probably good. And how much have you all grown over those last 30 years?
Yeah, so we grew to 100 million in revenue just a couple years ago. We cusped that milestone, which feels like a decent sized company from zero. So that's lovely. No debt, EBITDA margins in the 20s. And so I feel really good about that. So it scaled nicely, kind of at around a 20% growth clip for the last decade. The first 2 decades, it was fits and starts, and it was a bunch of dumb stuff. Early on, didn't hire full-time people. We hired contractors because Peter Drucker was right. We didn't have any money, and didn't have quite as much confidence in the business plan. So that was very difficult for having a common set of methods and proprietary data and having one brand. So that was an easy way to start a business, but a difficult way to scale it. So lots of mistakes along the way, but yeah, at 100 million in revenue and a 20% growth rate over the last 10 years or so, we feel like we've cracked the code on how to scale this thing. So we're in the US, UK, Germany, Canada, and we just opened an Australian practice this last year. And so we're in 5 countries, going to 10 over the next few years. And then that's fun because then you really have to fine tune the service offerings and make sure it fits the languages and the cultures where you expect it to do business. We probably have 150 clients or so and just under 200 employees globally.
Wow. And when you wrote the book Who, which by all accounts is I'd say, most influential work out there on this topic.
Thanks.
At least in modern times. Did writing that book, did that take you to a new place with the business, or was there a lag, or how did that, and when did you write that book?
Yeah. So it's 15 years ago. So it was like around 2008 is when we published the Who book. Yeah. It's really weird. In fact, as you mentioned that, I'm trying to think, did we get new clients from it? Did it give us more credibility? Like, what is it about that book that helped the business, and to what extent did it help the business? A lot of people want to write books and they think it's going to be, real groundbreaking for their business, no matter what it is. You're in finance, you're in, in whatever industry, and business books usually just don't make that big a difference for the employer, for the business that publishes it. I'd say it was a helpful credibility builder. I was a young founder. We wrote the book. Randy Street, who's been a longtime colleague for 20 years, he and I wrote it together along with our colleagues. It's been the top-selling book on hiring for each of the 15 years that it's been around. So you'd think that would contribute to demand creation, and it probably has. A lot of our big corporate clients seem to have come to us through word of mouth. But as I'm just kind of thinking through some of them, their initial experience with us was, through reading our Who book and saying like, wow, this is pretty helpful. It's a new crack at how to hire people with a greater degree of success. So I'd say, yeah, I'm happy we did it. It's not like the book itself has made a ton of money because, when you work with a large publisher, Random House is our publisher. They're the largest publisher in the world. They take a huge cut, and so you end up with just a wee percentage on the royalties. But their marketing power globally has been helpful, and so we can double click on it. It was basically, so we were around for 15 years before we published that book, and then but for the last 15 years has been the years that we've grown the most. I think it has been helpful for awareness and brand building, and it's kind of a simple model, and I think a simple model that's understandable and that's credible, that's based on science, is helpful for being a consulting firm and trying to educate the market and get people to follow a certain set of methods.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great book. And before I do a big hire, I typically dust it off and kind of reread it. While it's simple in concept and like most powerfully simple things, can have a huge impact on outcomes. But I think just rereading it forces me to have the discipline. I kind of get in this discipline place as
Yes.
opposed to gut feel or, my swashbuckler side of me that wants to just get it done as quickly as possible and
Yes.
spike the ball in the end zone. And that book just reminds me to slow down, to speed up, and do my homework, and so forth and so on. So it's not a book that I think you read once. I think it is a book that you can inspire yourself to better performance along the way. And I do want to thank you for the contribution to our industry. I mean, it's been.
Thanks.
I think if you on Zoom during COVID, you could look in the bookshelves behind the people who you were on the phone with a lot more in their homes and so forth than we did before. And it seems like at least 5 out of 10 times you'd see the Who book in the background, and it'd make me so happy about kind of a celebration of your work.
Thanks.
Big impact on our industry. Something that you said fairly subtly, I think is worth pulling on, and that is this notion of building your firm from the inside out.
Yes.
Meaning, in healthcare, there's a orthodoxy that you should focus on the patient and your teammates second. And what we have actually found is the opposite is true. That if you take care of your team, including your doctors and supporting teams, that they take care of the patient in a much more inspired way, and you kind of get to the same place, but through cultural leverage as opposed to patient experience.
Yes, we have not talked about this, you and I. This is going to be a lot of fun to explore. It's an age-old controversy, right? Who do you put first? Customers, employees, shareholders, et cetera, right? And stakeholder management today, we also add communities into the mix. And if you're an employee first founder or business executive and investor, you're that's a rarer perspective. It seems like most people don't say it, but they're shareholder first, and then customers second, employees third. And I'm with you. I think there's a fantastic power and an empowering feeling when you look at the culture that you're trying to build, and you realize that you can affect the experience of your employees, your colleagues. And if you hire and attract great ones to a great culture, that's how the patients or the customers get the very best products and services. That's how the investors see the best returns.
I would almost say you were ahead of your time in that regard. Because
I think you're ahead of your time.
Yeah.
We're making time about this. Yeah.
I just think it's, with a tightening workforce today, with the age of the baby boomers and the wisdom that's walking out the door with them, this is becoming a much more, I'd say, accepted philosophy. But I suppose if you go back to the Peter Drucker comment around how are you going to attract the best to become the best, you quickly and I'd say very aggressively got in this space of I want to create a wonderful environment for practitioners to hone their craft, build their lives, and leave whatever chapter of their lives with ghSMART better people for it. Did that come to you naturally, Geoff, or was that something that has always been part of the ghSMART blueprint? Or tell us about that.
I love this topic. So let's hit culture, and then let's definitely come back to the we can do cliff notes on good hiring also, as you set out at the beginning, which sounds great. My mom is a very empathetic person. So growing up, I saw a wonderful example of, she had just like the most amazing 360-degree radar for like who's feeling what and who needs what. Kids, dinner parties. She was constantly running community organizations. And so whether by biology or example, I definitely got a high appreciation for empathy from her. And then I got my teeth kicked in by Peter Drucker saying, like, if you don't build the right culture, you're not going to be able to hire the right people to do this kind of work. So the two together left me in front of a blank sheet of paper way back when with this it's almost like we today could consider it like design thinking. We want to empathize with the target person and then create a minimum viable product and then test it and iterate and that kind of thing. Well, the minimum viable product in this case was the culture that would attract the people. And so I literally started just writing stuff down because I came out of the field of industrial psychology, right? So we know what kind of cultures people thrive in, what they like, where they're engaged. And it's really simple stuff like, transparency is better than keeping people in the dark. Having a meritocracy is where people can actually see rewards proportionate to the value they're contributing. That's a good thing. Having, teamwork and respectful communication in the mix, that's a good thing. Freedom is something that's really interesting and I'd say controversial today. I built straight into the culture like, hey, look, I think people who are working in some of these other great strategy consulting firms don't feel like their time is their own. They just don't. That's just not the way those firms are set up. So I think I could create an edge here if we're able to provide a platform where they could do great work and have some of these other nice cultural things and have more freedom to control their time and more ability to opt in or out of stuff. I don't know where that was some old econ kind of free market, Milton Friedman stuff, but Adam Smith even, just if you have the freedom of choice, outcomes are going to sort their way out better than if you have some centrally planned thing telling you what to do. So in our culture, having freedom and a real focus on making sure people are happy and doing meaningful work and are compensated fairly and all that really is, I think, been an important focus. It sounds weird to say out loud, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit it on your podcast, but focusing on really genuinely caring about the well-being of your people first and your customers second, I do think is the best way to create a customer delighting organization. Is that which experiences are you drawing on where you guys had a more of a colleague first or employee first culture?
Well, in some ways, we built Rally Day based on a who model. As we share with founders that we meet, we were all founders of our own companies.
Yes.
And we're CEO and business builders. And in our industry of private equity, that's really unique. I don't know why that's unique. My instincts are, if you've got a founder who's building his or her business and they have two firms, one run by investors and one run by business builders, I would think I would choose the business builders all day long because I think they could be super helpful in ways that finance people might struggle with. And I just look at my two partners, Nancy Phillips, who built a $120 million EBITDA company here in Colorado, and my other partner, Mark Hopkins, and I see them working with founders. And it's just so inspiring, the difference, because I was in private equity for 15 years before I became a founder and CEO. And just that difference is amazing. And it trickles down through a whole organization. We call it a founder's focus. We talk a lot about being in the people business. We talk a lot about growing people, growing businesses. And at the end of the day, business is at this great intersection, if you allow it to be, of a professional objective and a personal journey.
Yes.
And it's all about creating an organization or platform that allows your teammates to join your organization, in this case, Rally Day, and say, gosh, I can actually use this platform to create my best self here at work, obviously, and also at home. And I think what you're talking about in terms of empathy, it's about, as you say, designing the organization to feed those ambitions, whether they be personal or professional, and then letting it go and letting it just happen and letting great people do great work and giving them permission to do it with their heart and mind and not just their mind, which is more often maybe what we're taught to do in leadership roles.
So true. And you have such a talented team at Rally Day. It's almost like in order to earn that level of talent, you have to provide a work platform that really hits, all the needs they have professionally and personally. I think there's a lag effect today in the global economy. I think a lot of more established companies need to catch up. I think with more entrepreneurial boutique firms like yours and others who can give people more of what they want. And I'd read somewhere, I won't attribute who said it, but a large banking CEO said something like, for example, it's not up to the employee whether they have to come into the office or something like that. And I kind of thought, ooh, it kind of is up to them, right? If you want to hire the best and brightest and retain them, you got to give them what they want. And in this day and age, you have Glassdoor, you have many, many objective third-party ways of measuring culture and having people tell you what it's really like working there. Maybe that's a step in the right direction for more companies to prioritize their people, because guess what? Your people are talking on Glassdoor and giving you ratings. And if you have it's out of 5, if you have like a sub 4 rating as a firm, you're in a period where you got to figure some stuff out. And if you're comfortably, for larger firms where there are thousands of people, doing these things, the companies can't dictate or manage it. It's just like free information out there. So I think work will continue to get better for people over time, with more transparency on where are good cultures, where are bad cultures, and people having more of the ability to sell their wares, if you will, in a global economy with frictionless ways of communicating around the world. So all that to say, companies that just take a customer or shareholder first approach without really prioritizing the people part, I fear will find themselves without the caliber of talent that they need to win and compete.
Yeah, and I agree there is a lag. And we do notice our highest performing founders are ones that have really humanized their purpose, mission, and strategy. So let's talk a bit. You mentioned your mom.
Yes.
We mentioned Peter Drucker. You do come from a lineage of really smart genes with your father, who I did get to meet once. He, for those who are unaware on this podcast, was the one who, and maybe Geoff, you'll want to correct me, but at least is credited with the words top grading. I know that you look up to your dad. How influential was he in what you became kind of in your, let's call it early, mid-20s?
Yeah, hugely influential. So if I got that empathy thing from my mom, I certainly got a heavy dose of like technical skill from my father. So he had he was like a solo practitioner, thought leader, industrial psychologist, consultant for most of his whole career. So growing up, I would listen to stories of him consulting with big companies and small ones on their hiring challenges and things around methods for picking people and coaching people to be successful. So yeah, it's basically like if your mom or dad was a lawyer and you become like a lawyer, you have like a huge leg up because you sort of like grew up in that industry. And the early parts of the codifying some of that stuff into methods that you could like talk about or train other people on. The top grading approach came out of an article we wrote together in 1998, last century. And then he turned it into a book, which did well. And then we co-owned the trademark to the term top grading 50/50, and I sold him my share. After it was clear that, he wanted to go in one direction. I wanted to go in a different direction. I actually wanted to go in a more simplified direction with the method to make it easier for entrepreneurs to execute and that kind of thing. So that the roots of like our Who book definitely come back to the top grading stuff, and I think that was maybe like the third or fourth book on interviewing and industrial psychology that my dad had written. So yeah, he was great. He was Jack Welch's leadership advisor, so that was kind of an interesting time in American industry with Jack Welch at the helm of GE. So I heard all those stories and felt like I got like an incredible education on the success and failure of executives and, tactics and tools for helping people hire and develop their teams. Today we talk shop some, but not as much as you might think. But yeah, obviously it was a wonderful to grow up. He was also a big proponent of like, hey, be the CEO, build a business, like and he was also a proponent of learning finance So he was like, he had studied psychology purely and thought, if to be, fluent in finance and understanding of the financial concepts that make us better advisors on the people front. And so he was right. I remember he gave me a book on reading financial statements when I was like 10. We're on a vacation, family like spring break in Hawaii somewhere. He gave me this green book. It was called Interpreting Financial Statements, and he said, "You know what? If you could read that book and make any sense of it, you're going to become a millionaire." I remember I was 10. I was like, "No way! That's awesome!" So of course I read the book cover to cover like 3 or 4 times. But yeah, I think for any business anywhere, certainly in the people business, if you can understand the business context in which you operate and be able to understand finance, that's helpful. People, if you're a major in like people and finance, I think you're 80% of the way there to building a great business, right?
I would agree with that. And in that order, it just dawned on me. I mean, how many people I meet, whether they be founders or other walks of life, and there's some who had parents that kind of prepared them nicely for the road ahead. Some parents overcook that clearly and try to prepare the road for their kids. Little different approach. I was raised by a grade school teacher and a weatherman, and they still don't know what I do. And I always wondered what it would have been like had my father been helpful to steering me in the right direction or knowing even how to encourage me in the work that I was doing. I know other friends who did follow in their father or mother's footsteps, and a lot of them have not complained, but there's a part of it that's hard. There's a little bit of a shadow
Right.
that you're living in, and maybe some expectations that aren't necessarily fair, or even that sense of ownership to your craft versus your mom and dad's. Has there been any negative stuff from being in your dad's footsteps early days? I mean, it's a
I
lot
think
different
so.
today,
Yeah.
but early days.
It's almost like the very early days, there wasn't any friction because I just didn't know anything. And it was great to, learn from a family member who's in an industry that I was interested in. And then the medium days, maybe, I don't know, let's say up to 5 years, maybe after I started my company and was doing, working in that industry. And it was like a co-opetition, we're friendly competitors. We partner up together on stuff sometimes, that kind of thing. So that was good fun. And in fact, in the very early days, I had built that network of contractors. So I had actually some scale to deliver larger projects. And so I remember in one case, there was a big insurance company that wanted some work, and my dad had just him. And then I had this like network of like 15 or 20 contractors. And so we teamed up, and sort of he brought the client and I brought the capacity, and we did some fun stuff together. So that was mostly net fun. Somewhere in that, I did get a little bit of like he'd like warn me unnecessarily about if I were to like, really start growing a company. I remember he told me if we surpassed 30 employees that, the laws changed and that it was going to be a very litigious environment. So I should, make sure I, didn't like, ever have more than 30 employees, like weird stuff like that, where it's kind of like, I don't know what that was. It was like fatherly, sort of, hey, don't get too big for your britches, or don't, like simmer down, like don't go too fast kind of thing. On one hand, I took it mostly as constructive, but there's some friction there where I was kind of like, stop doubting me, like I got this. And, that type of almost like teenager stage of the relationship. And then he actually, interestingly, later in life, focused more at the entrepreneurial end of the market, and my team and I focused more at the larger company executive stuff. And so it was just sort of like different business plans at that point. And he ended up creating more like tools and forms and stuff like that, more productized stuff. And that was different from the path that I was on also. So I think actually you've interviewed a lot of founders. I have as well. I think more often than not, some family member worked in the industry where they ended up being successful. Warren Buffett's dad was a stockbroker, right? I mean, it's like you peel the onion back and you go, oh, okay, hold on a sec. More often than not, I'd say, I don't know, 70% of the time, some family member had some background in that field, and then the next gen comes along and does something a little different or whatever and builds on it, and that's cool. You're one of the more rarities where you like figure it out on your own more. I don't know if you had early mentors that gave you some insights into the career that you picked, but it's definitely an advantage and something I'm grateful for, just having had some experience with this industry early on. I actually thought it was too squishy an industry. I thought, ooh, psychology, too squishy. I don't want to do that for a career when I was like in my middle school, high school, and college years. So I studied economics in college, and was going to like just do like pure finance because psychology was too squishy. But then this whole intersection of psychology and finance became so interesting that that's where I ended up going. But anyway, I think there are a lot of people who have family members that help give them a head start in an industry just by having worked in it. There's an entrepreneur guy who built a successful healthcare services company, but like his mom, dad, and all his relatives were all doctors and stuff. Yeah, so you kind of you're like, okay, I get it. Like that's helpful, right? To like grow up where you're hearing doctors talk about what they like and don't like about their workflows and everything, and then this guy goes and like automates some workflow for the healthcare industry. Like it kind of makes perfect sense.
What I found is most often the pattern that I like is when a founder has a father or mother who have also been entrepreneurs, and they've been at that dinner table talking about payroll, and they've
Yes,
and all of the various forms of drama that being a founder forces you to endure. And I do see sort of like the immigrant story in some ways, this resilience and grit that is repeated and handed down generation to generation to generation. In other words, you ask a great founder like about their lifestyle, and there's this expression, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. They don't even know how resilient they are because they've just been living in this crazy work life on the edge of reason, and
yes.
we've had a lot of debate here at our firm, and interested to hear your take on this. Would you rather hire someone with passion or obsession? And for us, the difference there is we find passionate people in a great way, relishing the journey, maybe taking more stock to the inputs to the ultimate reward versus the outputs. Sometimes we find passionate leaders to be maybe a little softer, and those that are obsessive, not very fun to be with. Typically, big chip on their shoulder, very focused on results, and I'm not sure we like that either. And what we've landed on is we want founders who have aggressive humility, which is this great combination of the humility of someone with a lot of passion, but the aggression of someone who's very obsessed. Tell me about how you think of those two words and where that plays into your view of like the perfect, kind of executive founder type.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I like your way of thinking about it. If we're going purely by the textbook, by the Who approach, we would say that we would caution against broad assumptions about what makes for a successful founder. That said, I think some of these are almost like this is like character deep type stuff. I think is helpful to look for founders if I'm you and back the ones that have that balance. So what would you call it? Passionate humility,
aggressive humility.
Yeah, aggressive humility. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's kind of like the level 5 Jim Collins stuff. There's similar themes there. Satya Nadella, who's not a founder but a phenomenal CEO of Microsoft, who took it over when it was more of a Steve Ballmer culture and it was on the decline, and then has now built it into the most valuable company in the world. I mean, he's like all about don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all, and having that aggressive humility to want to like learn, and the mindset that says like, you don't have all the answers. So surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, important things, and, listen and learn. I think all that's like very healthy. So yes, that, and I do have to just to be intellectually honest and a scientist admit that some of our very successful clients are more on the obsessive side, and they are kind of difficult, and they just are. So it's like if you're doing a turnaround in some hard industry that's a real sharp elbows kind of place, the type of profile you want running that is going to look a little more obsessive and sharp elbowed maybe than if you're, I don't know, building a chain of kinder care, after school mentoring programs or something. So it's all about scorecard, Ryan, where, different environments require a different profile, I believe.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this
Yeah.
naturally, just given what we do for a living. And maybe the best metaphor I have is it's funny enough, I was in the rodeo when I was a kid. I don't know if you knew
The
that.
rodeo, I didn't know that.
I grew up in this little town, and I wasn't very good at sports. And I got into 4-H, and we had 2 horses. We had Pegasus, that was this very lovely horse that was so gentle and kind. You could almost see it in his eyes. And we would always, I had 2 other brothers, we'd fight for who got to ride on Pegasus. We had this other horse named Chance. And the reason he got the name Chance was you were taking a chance on life by jumping on this thing. And it was almost like a hang on for dear life type of experience. And I was in the rodeo one year on Pegasus and was like dead last. But I felt like I was in control. It was a very, measured experience. The next year, for whatever reason, Chance was my only option. And I mean, I hung on for dear life the whole time. I barely remember any of that experience. And I ended up taking first place.
Yes.
And it's a good lesson in terms of, for me, the type of founders that I want to back. I want them to pull me to places that I'm almost uncomfortable going.
Yes.
As to feeling like I have to push, aggression onto somebody.
Yes.
I wish I could find the right hybrid between Pegasus and Chance, but if I had to choose one, discomfort wins every time.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And we're so drawn to the Pegasus, but you end up winning rodeos with the Chance.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. But let's, if you don't mind, let's segue a bit into some observations about you as a leader.
Okay.
I wanted to share with you some of the things I've learned from you. For those of you listening, Geoff has always been that person in my life where when I got to a crossroads professionally, he was a great person, always took the time. I could share with him where I was, what roads I was looking at, and help me craft, my best path forward. And funny enough, Geoff, I don't know if you remember this, but I had just left private equity after 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I was, I guess you could say, having a midlife crisis. I was 40 at the time. And we had lunch downtown, and you gave me a super amount of confidence when I hadn't really felt that in a while. And I was asking you, what should I do? Should I go back into private equity, which I really can't stand? Should I pour myself into my nonprofit work, which I was really excited about at the time, which you've been part of? Or should I go, build a business or be a CEO? And you said, why don't you just do all 3 of those things? Like, why do you feel like you have to make a choice between those alternatives, and just treat your life like a portfolio? You're a father, you're a husband, you're, nonprofit person, you're building a business, you can be in private equity. And I really took that seriously. And so I know you have maybe a bias towards looking at your professional life through those, through that way. But what I've noticed about you is just how deliberate you are. Like, the amount of discipline. I notice if I send you a text on a topic that's not very interesting to you, You'll just say, no comment. You don't find yourself needing to be agreeable. You're very, very disciplined as it relates to where you spend your time, what your priorities are, who you spend your time with, and the type of relationships that you want with people. And it reminds me of the book that you called, I think it was called Power Score, was your second book after Who?
Yes.
But I think those three things that you assessed there as a researcher was, kind of the priorities of the company.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Priorities of the company, the people in your company.
Yes.
And then the type of relationship that you want with those people and the type of relationship you want those people to have with each other.
Yep.
And I look at your personal life and like the way you roll, at least from the outside looking in, it's almost as if you wake up every day asking yourself those three questions and actually take your own medicine. Tell us more.
Thank you. That's really, it feels weird for you to observe that because it's true. And I appreciate that. I wake up every day and actually have 12 questions that I ask myself on a journal. I'm a huge journaler. I love journaling. And I find it where it's not a heavy grind or a lift to stay focused on the things that matter most. If you have some mechanism for reviewing them. Some people do it with like meditation. I know one friend, I think this is public info, so I hope I'm not violating any confidences. Marshall Goldsmith, who's another like book author guy. He's sold millions more books than I have, and he's very wise on personal performance and those kind of topics. And he has an actual person call him every day at 5:00, a human, and go through a spreadsheet. He probably has 20 plus things on it that are somewhat binary. Yes or no. Did you, do at least 50 push-ups today? Did you give at least one good compliment to your spouse? Did you, spend at least 20 minutes writing or, these things? It's kind of like Ben Franklin's checklist, where he'd like reflect on these virtues. So I find that inspiring. And Marshall Goldsmith's perspective is like, yeah, if you want to be, healthy, you got to, be disciplined. So sometimes people are like, oh, you already seem pretty healthy. Why do you need to, take time in every single day, do some exercise? He's like, well, yeah, that's why I'm healthy. It's because it's like I practice the discipline. So I do sort of like a watered down version of that level of discipline, but I do reflect on, what I really want. Who are the, key people? I do have a who lens. I think if you think about both personally and professionally, who you want to allocate time to as a predictor of your happiness and impact and fulfillment as a person, it's a powerful lens to view everything through. So I do think about on those three things, and thanks for the power score. The big finding from that research was leaders of teams that were good at these three things they achieved their financial targets 20 times more often than leaders of teams who were not good at all three of these things. And the three things are being able to prioritize. And to me, that what comes up is more about saying no to a whole bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, sorry, it just is. So if you really think deeply about what's important and the short list of what's important, and you put disproportionate energy against those priorities, that seems to me to be the pattern of happiness and impact that I see in you and others. So priorities, saying no to a lot of stuff so that you can say yes to the most important stuff. 1, 2, on hiring and or surrounding yourselves with the right people, I think is just a discipline. I do see a lot of people suffering because they're in professional or personal relationships that are toxic or just not healthy, and to not be in those is really smart, and to search out more other healthy relationships in certain categories I think is great. And then just checking in with yourself and with your loved ones and colleagues. I'm like, all right, it's almost like here's me and here are all these relationships I have. Which ones have green lines, meaning like it's going great, or yellow lines like, oh, it's a little dicey, or red, like, oh, there's like a real problem, and being, I guess, methodical about just reflecting on where are my relationships good or okay or not great. I think is helpful. I don't know. I don't have all the answers to any of this stuff, but I think having little tools for channeling the scarce energy we have, during this lifetime into meaningful work and meaningful relationships can be helpful. And if I need the level of discipline where I got to look at something once a day, Marshall Goldsmith likes to have someone actually physically ask him to check through his checklist. Other people just are more intuitive about that. But I think that's right. What I miss, I think, in being that deliberate is there's magic in unplanned stuff. And I'm a bit more of a control freak around my time and just what I do, that I'm certain that there's amazing experiences that I'm not having because I'm a little bit too focused on like, oh, let's spend the right amount of time with the right priorities and people, et cetera.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because I don't necessarily fancy myself to be a very disciplined person necessarily, but if I look back and I think about how I've made decisions and
Mhm.
what I think about when I wake up in the morning, I suppose I'd probably be somewhere in that camp. Um, but I do wonder for those that have an overabundance of discipline, what the cost is. And
Mm.
it's probably stuff like you're talking about. It's that date night that just happened, or it's that, bike ride that you just took because you were bored, and or skiing with buddies that you met because you just were at Vail at the same time, or whatever. Um, on that topic, I mean, at this point in your career and life, um, what does bring you like that kind of almost bellowy laugh joy?
Yeah,
What are those things? I mean, maybe other than your kids, because I think we could all talk about that, but
sure.
other than your kids.
I don't know. There's something. Let's see here. Since this is a work podcast, I go to work first in my head, and I have lots of belly laughs and joy just with friends doing weird, fun things. I'm not a big basketball fan, but one of our friends took us courtside last night at the Nuggets game, and they're tied in the whatever semifinals or whatever it is right now, 2-2. So it's an important game, and we're like winning, and we're all high fiving, and it's just hilarious and fun to celebrate anything positive personally. So I think it's easier to have belly laughs and have fun personally. Professionally, there's some combination of trying to do difficult but meaningful things with people who are really skilled, but in like different ways that I think is really fun. Like I just think professionally of having wins where, you know, you or I, we're not the one driving the whole thing, but you're sort of architecting from the background and then encouraging maybe someone who's, on the rise in their career to take on something that's difficult and then to be a sounding board or play like a very small role, but have that person or that team do something really cool and impactful and then feel really proud of it. That's pretty fun. I don't know about belly laugh as much as it's kind of like just that high five, great job, kudos kind of moment is great to have. And I love being in cultures or helping shape cultures that are very appreciation heavy, where you're calling out people's great work. It just feels good and it's like productive and it, reinforces the behaviors and the results that you're looking for. So, but it's usually around doing hard stuff. Doing easy stuff, isn't super fun or fulfilling or impactful. I have a shorthand in business where I like impact, money, and fun. That's what I'm into. So things that we can do that, really make a positive impact in someone's life getting better and that happens to be profitable, that, is actually fun. I mean, that's basically what I guess my true north is as a business person. I wouldn't want to make money or have fun without impact. I think that feels almost like, shoplifting or something. Like you don't want to go steal some equipment out of a Best Buy, right? You want to deliver value for sure, but to deliver value and not see any rewards from it, that's not a lot of fun. But to deliver value and see some rewards and have a positive supportive cultures is good fun. But I'm 51 now, and so I think I'm definitely in the season of the founder journey where it's more about selecting and backing other people and being happy when they're successful than in running around trying to grandstand or get some kudos myself. I like kudos. I don't mind kudos, but it's even more rewarding to like bet on, especially like, younger up and coming people who have a lot of potential and they try something and they learn and they fail and they learn and it's great, or they succeed and they're so happy. That's really fun in business.
I love that notion of graduating. We did a presentation for our accounting team some months ago, and we talked about the 4 phases of a career, and these aren't perfectly true for everybody, but your first job is a job, and what you want out of that job is a paycheck. And then you get to this point in your life where you want to build a career, and there you're looking for promotions and advancement. Maybe you want to buy a home, build a family, but a career is all about making progress in your life. And then you get to this interesting place. The Romans called it, in Latin at least, vocatus, which is vocation. And vocation mindset is, that word comes from like your calling, like what you feel almost pulled to do that you almost can't resist because it's like pulling you into work that really matters. And there, what you get out of that is impact. And then the last place is more of an artesian, where what you're getting out of that is an opportunity to express yourself. And we don't advise a lot of people to go all the way there, because expression can not produce impact and it cannot make money. But the vocational mindset, which is about impacting the world through others, is a really wonderful place to graduate. So happy that you're at this place in your life. I also think it's interesting that all this time we're focusing on our own performance, and when you do graduate and you realize, oh man, I really wish I would have discovered this 20 years ago, because I could have accomplished so much more with that mindset, kind of through others, as opposed to always feeling like you're out in front and an individual contributor. Do you find you're more effective now, Geoff, than you were 10, 15 years ago?
For sure. There's a great leader who comes to mind as he say that. I think he gave us permission to talk about this in our books. His name is John. He was an S&P 500 beating Fortune 500 CEO, just titan of industry that you'd think would be very vocal in meetings and like, let's take that hill, and very much that type of leader. And I was struck, having sat through many boardroom meetings and senior executive team meetings, by how little he said. He really, really just intensely listened, was very supportive in his body language and in the questions he asked, but really let other people lead. And I think it takes a great deal of self-confidence and just belief in the abilities of others to like say less. So yeah, I was a unbelievably wordy earlier founder entrepreneur who I thought I had to like have all the answers to everything. But in this stage, I have learned from others, and I control my own tendencies to say too much and really enjoy playing that supportive role. And if you kind of get out of the way a bit, I think you do surprise yourself with how much people can accomplish if you give them that freedom to do that in an environment where they know that they can make choices and move quickly without having to, double check everything with you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I spent last week at a conference for this organization called Conscious Capitalism, which was more or less inspired by the work that John Mackey did at Whole Foods.
Whole Foods founder, right?
Yeah. And he was there, and I just like found myself like kind of creepy guy watching him, and I was looking at him talk with people and just the way he carried himself, and I could go on and on. But the word that came to my mind was that he did not project strength, he radiated it. It almost was as if he had a magnetic field around him. And I don't know where that comes from. But when you were talking about where you're at right now, I do think there's this like quiet strength that can radiate as opposed to project, that is like super powerful. I don't know where we find that, but
I love that. That's fascinating. Maybe it's his own just like belief system that that the organization, whether it's Whole Foods or other, is doing good things in the world, and that he wants to see his people thrive and lead, and he's perfectly comfortable not running around necessarily being the front person for all that. Yeah, it's interesting. That's great that you got to spend time with him. He's one of the greats.
Yeah, he certainly is. He gave me his book. I think it's called The Whole Story, which is kind of a clever name for his book. I have not read it, but let's talk here at the end. For those who want to learn the ghSMART system, you've given an open source Linux type version with your book, Who.
Yep.
If you want to know about how to build a kick-ass organization that is enduring and powerful, PowerScore is the simplest, most powerful model I've ever read. But if we want to take this a step further, we have some listeners that aren't founders, but they're, very high in their careers and doing great things. But for those listening, you've been studying, extraordinary executives now for 30 years, probably longer if you include dinner time with dad and such.
Right.
Give us the ultimate cliff notes, Geoff. I mean, if you could only ask somebody 3 questions and you were going to do an assessment based on 3 questions, you probably would say, don't pay me for that. But if there were 3 questions, what would they be?
No. I can't go there.
Too gimmicky?
I can go. Yeah. It's like, I'm happy to give you the cliff notes. So maybe you want brevity and cliff notes. Asking someone 3 questions to try to get I'd give you 3 principles. How about that?
That's perfect.
I'll answer your question. I won't be a stubborn
No.
guest.
As soon as I asked it, it was leaving my mouth. I was like, you know what? Jeff's going to tell me he's not going to answer it that way.
I'm cooperating with the idea of like 3 things that are most important to keep in mind if you want to like hire well. So thing 1 is you have to think about what the stupid criteria are that you're going to use to make a good decision ahead of time. So a lot of people roll into an interview and go for gut feel and go for chemistry and that kind of thing. That's going to get you in hot water. You're going to have bias. You're going to make bad decisions. So basically coming up with like a set of criteria that you think matter before you even start talking to people. That's job 1. That's called the scorecard. So you got to do that. The second thing is around sourcing talent. So we found when we did the research for the Who book, a lot of these entrepreneurs who built great companies, we asked them, like, where did you find your best talent? Where did you find your best talent? And a great percentage of them kind of almost like activated the whole organization to be a big recruiting unit. So messaging to your own colleagues and employees like, hey, look, we got to be on the lookout for great talent, who are great, talented, diverse, good-hearted people from all backgrounds who and to always be in that, it's like the always be closing. It's like always be recruiting mindset around sourcing. That really does make the difference between entrepreneurs I've seen be successful and those who just have a good product idea, but somehow can never really execute on it. So sourcing aggressively and all the time, always trying to like look for talent. And the final of your 3, I would say is a step for truly understanding someone is about gathering data about what they've done before. And from birth till today, what are the things that they've done well or not well? Who have they worked with well or not well? What are like the facts around how this person has performed, how well they performed, and what sort of context? By having a mindset where you're like really trying to understand the data that makes someone who they are is a much different mindset than, just again, like going for chemistry or going for, do I like this person? You can like someone after they really perform well with you. And that's a narrow margin than just, using like, do I like this person as the goal of interviews. So, and finally, PS, don't ask people hypothetical questions during interviews because you get hypothetical answers, and a lot of really smart, otherwise very smart people, unfortunately, fall into this trap when they're trying to interview people and hire them, where they're asking, how would you do this? How would you do that? And unfortunately, a whole century worth of research in my field of psychology suggests that hypothetical interview questions just don't predict how someone performs on the job. So instead, ask them what they have done and try to interpret how relevant that is, what the magnitude of those accomplishments are, et cetera, as opposed to asking people hypothetical things. So those are the 3 principles that if you use a scorecard for criteria rather than just your gut, if you get your whole organization activated around looking for great talent to get a good source of talent, And then if you do the hard work to understand someone for who they really are and what they've really done throughout their career, almost like an iceberg where the top part, that, friendly handshake and they acted great during the interview, is like what's visible above the waterline. But it's all that data under the waterline that you need to collect and understand in order to make a good judgment about if someone is a good fit for a role or not. There's the cliffiest cliff notes I can give you on the how to hire well.
It's so interesting because a lot of the companies that we invest in, they're say 50, 60 million in revenue. And typically the founder didn't have like the staircase of career advancements that you would more likely see in an executive hire. And it makes it really tough to get that kind of quantifiable storytelling that allows you to kind of look to the past to predict the future.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these folks, in some cases, aren't employable.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have this independent streak in them that they didn't ever have a career. And their career has been maybe 3 failures followed by a resounding success. And if you read all these biographical stories of the really, truly greats, I mean, can you imagine Elon Musk working for you, for example? Like
Right.
that would last, I don't know. Well, it would last 0 because he would never come. But the point is, like, if you interviewed Elon Musk 30 years ago, I'm not sure he would have been an A player in your Rubik.
Right.
Is that?
I think that's right. I think interviewing people for clear jobs that have, and that people have, a track record that you can measure. So for the non-founder, I think the approach is pretty straightforward. It's basically like, what's the job? And then to what extent is this person, shown strength or weakness in the things that are important for that job? For as far as like predicting, Bill Gates or, Elon Musk or some of these like runaway success stories. I mean, I think it's like pretty difficult to do using a standard like kind of employment interviewing approach. But then again, they are like 1 in a billion. So hard to know those folks with especially early career. I think for the founder who's had a couple of wins, who wants to do a bigger thing or get access to capital to do, a 70% similar business model, 30% new, I think you can get some good data there that suggests what part of that business plan that you're going to be good at or not good at. But yeah, like your young founders who really haven't lived life much, who are, trying to take on the world, very difficult to predict their performance.
Well, as we started this interview, Peter Drucker, who's the greatest mind in management and leadership in the world and perhaps in the history of the world, got it wrong with your business plan.
Well, sure. He wouldn't have invested.
Yeah. So I think it's a topic maybe for another day. We are working on a project right now at our firm to try to get better at least getting alignment around what we're looking for in founders is kind of step 1, which you could liken to your scorecard. And then it's in our business, you kind of fall in love with every founder, at least we do. And when you get into a deal, you also get in love with the deal. And so between love for a founder, love for the deal, we end up, perhaps missing more critical thinking as it relates to the founder's growth potential and therefore the growth potential of the company. So we're thinking about having a different managing partner actually do the quote unquote assessment who's not on the deal.
Sure. Makes
as
sense.
a way to
more
create
of an objective third party.
Yeah.
A little bit less founder love and deal love.
Yeah. Maybe a more sobered version of the assessment. So, we're trying to find the tricks of that trade, and I probably will need to dust off who again, just to remind me to come back to earth and do this the right way. Geoff, I guess our time is up. I mean, I could literally talk to you for hours. You would get up and leave eventually. I have no doubt. Lauren would call, or one of the kids would call, and you'd probably walk or run out of here. But I do want to thank you for the contributions you've made to my life. my personal and professional lives are kind of one and the same. And you've just been such a loyal influence. Whenever I pick up the phone, you answer. Even texts that are annoying, you respond to. And when I've had those like soul rattling moments in my career / life, you've always given me an hour or two to talk through it without that scary advice maybe your dad gave you, but really one based on, what do you want, Ryan? And what can I do to help? And I know that there's stories all over the world, Geoff Smart stories around you picking up the phone and helping people when they need it the most. And I'd like to think that when we're all graying and at the end of this professional life, that that's something you take great pride in, Geoff, because it's a real gift you've given all of us. So I just want to make sure I say thank you.
Well, the gratitude goes both ways. I appreciate those kind words, and it's been a lot of fun. Everything you and I have done together, informally or formally, has been an absolute blast. And so I thank you for your friendship, and I think you're an inspiration back this way as much as I might have been an inspiration for you.
All right. Thank you for your time, and for all you founders and people out there doing great things. Grab PowerScore, and follow Geoff's blogs. It's amazing. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan.